Welcome to your Bible Guide. We are starting a new series exploring the book of Exodus. Now, the book of Exodus is really one of the central stories of the entire Old Testament and really gives identity to the Jewish people. And this is one they refer to constantly all throughout the Old Testament and even in the New Testament because it really captured the essence of what it meant to be a Jew, explores the law, and focuses on the story of Moses. And so we're going to be spending the next number of weeks and months going through this amazing book. And so we're going to start off in chapter 1 today, and we're going to look through the entire chapter. And I'm just going to add some comments on there. And here's what it says. Exodus chapter 1, it says, "These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household." So it's picking up on the story of the nation of Israel. So going back in the book of Genesis, it started off with Abraham, and Abraham is called by God, and they're going to be a blessing to the entire world, him and his family. And so the rest of Genesis will follow his story, his family's line, and he has sons, and they have sons, and there's all kinds of drama in there. It really reads kind of like a Jerry Springer episode a lot of times. And so finally, one of the stories is about, I think it's his great-great-grandson, Joseph. And Joseph gets sold into slavery by his own brothers, and God miraculously takes him and puts him second in control of the entire world over the country of Egypt. And there's a big famine in the land, and God miraculously saves the Israelites, the Jews, through Joseph and just his story of events. And so this picks up afterwards, and it's talking about the sons of Jacob, Joseph being one of them, and this family line. And so it's continuing this story in here. Okay, so it says these are the names of them. Okay, verse 2, it says Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. All the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. Joseph was already in Egypt. Okay, and so it's just kind of getting the names, and those are the 12 patriarchs of Israel. The family that makes up later becomes the Jews. Verse 6, it says, "Then Joseph died, and all of his brothers, and all that generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so the land was filled with them." So now the family had moved from Canaan, the promised land, which we'll encounter more later in the book of Exodus, and as they're moving towards there, they don't quite make it there in the book, but that's the promised land. And so they're now currently living in Egypt, right? So Joseph was second in command of the Egyptians, and so they're living in this land. Mostly as kind of sheep herders, and they're multiplying. Okay, so it started off as 70, and they just started increasing, having babies, and God's really blessing them for that. Okay, so it moves on in the story in verse chapter 8. Oh, and here's what it says. It says, "Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, 'Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us.'" And so the king is looking around, and he's looking at all of Joseph's family, the Israelites, and they're just becoming bigger and bigger and stronger. And this is concerning for the king because they're not his people, but they're living in his land. And so he's worried about them. He's like, there's too many. They're becoming too powerful. So verse 10, it says, "Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." And so they're worried about this situation here. Just from a national standpoint, they're like, there's too many of them. What happens if they come against us and join another nation and they take us out? So that's his worry. Verse 11, "Therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses." And so what they do is basically they enslave them. They say, okay, we're worried about them, and so we're going to kind of take them over. We're going to enslave them, and this will fix our national dilemma of all these Israelites in the land. Verse 12, it says, "But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel." So the more they put stuff against them, the more God kind of blessed them. And so it's not mentioning God right here in this part of the story, but you can kind of see the underlying thing of God is blessing these people. And this is really concerning to the Egyptians because they they don't want to be taken over. Okay, and so we look at end of verse 12 says the Egyptians were in dread, right? So they were really kind of like, oh man, we really got to get this. Verse 13, it says, so they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in all kinds of work in the field. In all the work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. So this is really a difficult situation for the Israelites. Working and making brick, so they're doing hard stuff. They're not just like doing some nice things here and there for the king. They are really put to work, the most difficult work there is, working the field, making mortar and brick, really hard stuff. It continues in verse 15. It says, then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live. So it goes to this next step. Not only were they enslaved, the king is telling the midwives, okay, the ones that's helping deliver the babies for the Israelites, if it's a son, to actually kill him. Okay, now this is really a bad predicament. This is really obviously a challenge to where these midwives are basically told to kill off the baby sons. Verse 17, here's what how the midwives responded. It says, but the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. Right? So the midwives are looking around being like, we can't just kill these babies. That would be an atrocity. And so they don't listen. It says they do this because they fear God. Now, one of the main ideas that gets fleshed out as the people of God, the Jewish people and Christians now, is we believe we are made in the image of God. And one of the things that being made in God's image, it gives humanity value that is different than anything else, right? It's different than a dog or a cat or some kind of animal. It's different than a plant. Because humans are made in the image of God. And so this was one of the main ideas, main tenets of the people of God. And so it says when they feared God, they're saying, hey, God has made humans in his own image. And so we're not going to just go around and kill them off. Like that's just not right. That humans have value. Okay, and so they didn't listen to the king, and they let the baby sons live. Verse 18, it says, so the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this? And let the male children live, right? So they're noticing, like, wait a second, we told you to kill them. We see little babies around. They're living. Remember, so the Hebrews did live in the land of Goshen, so it was kind of their own little area. And we don't know where all they got pushed for working as slaves and stuff. It just doesn't kind of give some of those details really for us, but they're just acknowledging, like, hey, we see that you're not killing the sons; they're still alive. And so the midwives, verse 19 says, the midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. Right? And so they're just saying, hey, they have the babies really fast. They have the babies before we can get there, and it's already a done deal. This was their excuse for it. Verse 20. So God dealt well with the midwives. Right, so God is watching this, and the observation of the writer here, okay, and most people believe Moses was the author of Exodus, and we're going to get to Moses' character coming up in the next chapter, and so, but the observation here is that, God is seeing what the midwives are doing, and he's acknowledging, be like, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. It says God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. Right? So the more oppression, the more God's favor is coming in and helping his people out. And we're going to see this throughout this book of how God interacts with this people. So verse 21, it says, and because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Right? And so one of the things that it recognizes here is the midwives are being honored and being given families, and that was seen to be a blessing. For what they've done. Verse 22, it says, then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. Okay, and so now Pharaoh puts his command out not just to the midwives, because he's seeing that's not working very well. It says Pharaoh commanded all his people, right? So all the Egyptians, if they come across, Hebrew son being born and baby and stuff, it says you're going to cast him into the Nile, right? The Nile being the major river that really flowed down through all of Egypt, and it was really their source of everything. And he says what you're going to do is you're going to cast the baby's son, okay? And it points out sons into the Nile, right? And so here's the situation that starts up this story. And just kind of a quick recap. So the Israelites were in the land of Egypt because of a famine and Joseph's family that brought them there. And now Pharaoh wants to oppress them because he's worried that they're going to take him over, or they get enslaved. And then not only do they want to enslave them, they're worried about the population getting too much bigger, especially with the sons, because sons are an advantage in a military sense more than daughters. Okay, that's why the discrepancy likely is the sons will turn into warriors, and that could be a problem for them. And so they want to wipe them out. They want to kill them off. But we see even in this first part of the story where God is in the midst of doing things and protecting, and we see this group of midwives who are really kind of the heroes of this part of the story who say, we're going to listen to God and do his ways even more so than the Pharaoh. We're not going to listen to the Pharaoh. We're just going to listen because we fear God. Now, this is a really important part, this idea of fearing the Lord. And this is a big theme throughout many different parts in the Bible. We see it written about in Proverbs, the wisdom literature of what does it mean to fear God. And this is really something that we need to explore as followers of God as well. What does it mean to fear him? Okay, now I don't think it's trying to say like they were, afraid of God, kind of like that Halloween scary movie type of fear. What it means to fear God is it really means like that we have an understanding that God holds us accountable for our decisions. Right? And so there's this aspect of fear being an awe and a reverence, but also this aspect where God's got to hold us accountable for the things that we do. And he not only has the power to do it, right? Like God can take and remove life, give and take away, our very lives and stuff. And so we know he can hold us accountable. And so when we realize that God can hold us accountable for what we do, it influences how we act in the decisions that we make. And this is really what it means to fear God. And this is what it looked like for the midwives to fear God, is they're like, hey, okay, we know God values humans. And it would not be right for us to kill them. Okay, just innocent little babies, right? That wouldn't be right. And so they fear God. They say, okay, God would hold us accountable if we do that. And so we're going to trust that God's way is more important than the Pharaoh's way. Okay, like typically speaking, generally the Christian followers of God are supposed to honor and respect the governments that are put in place. Okay, so generally speaking, we're supposed to listen. Oh, if there's a law, okay, don't speed. Okay, yeah, I can follow that law. So generally speaking, we're supposed to, okay? Even in the New Testament, it tells us, hey, we're supposed to be law-abiding citizens. We're supposed to be the best citizens, right? We're supposed to really honor the laws. But sometimes the laws of the land might contradict the laws of God. Now, when there's a discrepancy between the laws of man and the laws of God, what it means to fear God is that we are going to obey and abide by the laws of God over any laws of man. Okay, and this is where sometimes Christians and followers of God can get in trouble with the law, with governments, because they're going to abide and follow God's laws rather than follow the laws of the government. And so, but we see the importance here, and also how God looks down, and it really shows God's favor upon the midwives for making that decision, for saying, I'm going to fear God, I'm going to listen to his ways more than even what the king might say. And God favors them and blesses them with families and stuff. And this is true now. It's like we are really supposed to say, you know what, God is my king. I'm going to put him first above every single thing. There's nothing that's going to get me in the way of if I have to make a decision between God's ways and any human's ways, I'm going to make the right decision. And we can implement this. We can work this out in our own lives. Okay, it might be even in our job situations where your boss wants you to do something immoral, wants you to do something illegal, wants you to do something dishonest, and you might have to say, you know what, I'm going to fear God. I'm going to do things God's way instead of doing things, some human's way. And this is really one of the core things as followers of God. Is like, God is the king. He is the ruler of my life. And I'm going to put his way above any other way that I might come up against.